I came across the story of Hollow Rock Lighthouse not through folklore, not through the hushed warnings of fishermen, but through a stack of damp notebooks locked away in the archives of a coastal museum, forgotten in a drawer that hadn't been opened in decades, the kind of place that smells of mildew, rust, and paper slowly rotting into dust, the kind of place that holds things nobody really wants to remember but can't quite throw away. The notebooks were bound in cracked leather, the ink faded but still legible, and each bore the name of a man who had once kept the light burning out at Hollow Rock, a jagged black formation 2 miles offshore, where the waves broke so violently that even gulls avoided resting there. The lighthouse had been built in 1879 and automated in the 1970s, abandoned to storms and salt, its beam replaced by a cold mechanical light. But the notebooks suggested there had been something else there, something unspoken, something that gnawed at every keeper who ever lived alone in that tower. The first entries were ordinary, just the daily life of a man tending the lamp, checking oil, polishing brass, boiling water for tea, jotting down the weather, the tides, the arrival of the supply boat, sometimes a lonely note about missing his wife or a remark about the stars being clear. But gradually, across the years, the entries began to change. Words creeping in at the edges like mold, words like voices, stares, whispers at the door, until by the time I reached the notebook from 1923, the entries had become frantic. One page was smeared, the ink blotted by what looked like seawater, though the notebook had been stored in a locked drawer far from the sea. And on that page the keeper had written the same sentence over and over again in a slanting, shaking hand. They want me to open the door. They want me to open the door. They want me to open the door. The next pages were worse. Drawings mostly, crude sketches of the spiral stairwell, of windows black with storm, of faces pressed against the glass where no face could possibly be, faces too long, too thin, with wide mouths gaping as though in song or hunger. I set the notebook down that night, but I couldn't shake it, and by morning I had already made up my mind. I had to see Hollow Rock Lighthouse for myself, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of some darker pull, the way certain places seem to call to you when you read about them, whispering your name through the page. I told myself it was research, history, but deep down I knew it was more than that. I knew I was answering the same call those keepers had heard. The boat ride out was rough, the sea dark even under a bright sky, and as we approached the rock the lighthouse loomed, taller than I expected, its stones blackened by years of storms, the glass of the lantern room broken in places, jagged like teeth, the dock half collapsed, but still enough for me to climb onto with the help of the old fisherman who had agreed, reluctantly, to take me out there for a price. He wouldn't stay though. He muttered something about not waiting, about being back by sundown if I was still there, and then he pushed away from the rock as though afraid even to brush against it. Inside, the air was thick with damp, the smell of rot and salt mingling until it felt like breathing in the ocean itself. The furniture was still there, overturned and swollen with water damage. The stairwell climbing up into shadow, the walls etched with strange scratches, long parallel grooves as though something with claws had dragged itself along the stone. I lit my lantern and began to climb, each step echoing far too loud in the hollow space, the sound seeming to come back distorted, like footsteps that didn't quite match my own. Halfway up, I found the keeper's quarters, the cot rusted, the sheets black with mildew, and on the desk another notebook, swollen with damp, but still intact. My hands shook as I opened it. The last entry written in 1954, the handwriting jagged, frantic. It's beneath the stone, it calls through the cracks. I have barred the hatch, but it will not hold. God help me, it will not hold. That was when I heard it, faint at first, a low rhythmic thud coming from below my feet, from somewhere beneath the floor of the lighthouse, a pounding that grew louder, heavier, as though something were striking the foundations. I froze, my lantern trembling in my grip, and then came the sound of water trickling, though no pipes remained, water seeping through stone, carrying with it the faintest murmur of voices, rising and falling like a tide. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all speaking at once, not loud but insistent, pressing into my ears until I thought my skull might crack. I staggered up the stairs, desperate to get to the lantern room, to see daylight, to breathe, and when I reached it, the broken glass let in the wind, the sea spray cold against my face. But even there, the voices did not stop. They only grew clearer, shaping themselves into words, into a single command whispered over and over. Open the door, open the door, open the door. I didn't know what door they meant until I looked down through the spiral of steps, and saw it. A hatch in the stone floor I hadn't noticed before, its iron hinges red with rust, its edges dark with brine, as though something wet pressed constantly against it from below. The pounding was louder now, shaking the entire tower, dust raining from the ceiling, and the voices rose to a fever pitch, all of them begging, pleading, promising release, promising knowledge, promising anything if I would just open it. I don't remember how long I stood there, frozen, my lantern swinging, the beam catching on the hatch again and again, but I know I did not open it. I know that whatever was beneath those stones wanted me to, and I know that every keeper before me must have heard the same plea, some resisting, some failing, some perhaps vanishing into the dark. When the fisherman returned for me, I was already outside on the broken dock, my lantern long extinguished, my hands still trembling. I didn't speak a word the entire ride back, and I never returned. But sometimes, late at night when the sea wind rattles the windows, I hear it again in the walls of my own home, that soft, patient chorus, waiting still, whispering in voices that sound far too much like the drowned. Open the door.